Hi, everyone. I want to welcome you to this session of great books as we complete our second month on David Whyte's Crossing the Unknown Sea with Sanna, one of our doctoral students. It's been very interesting. I missed last month because I was in Chartres making pilgrimage. And this book by David Whyte is about pilgrimage. So Sanna, welcome back, and people were so pleased by your presentation last month. We're all looking forward to what you have to say this month. And you all know the drill, everyone. Sanna will make a presentation at the end of which I'll come back on, and then we'll have a dialogue with all of you for the balance of the time. So Sanna, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jim. I appreciate the invitation. It's been a wonderful project to prepare this, to review something that I love so much, and to just it's total joy to share this work, the mind and the spirit and the writing of David Whyte, who is a poet and a naturalist and a philosopher, all the things I love so much. And is an educator grounded in Celtic wisdom. So just covers the full spectrum for me. And yeah, so I'm really hoping to share the essence of this book. This is part 2 of a 2-part presentation. For anyone who's joining us via recording, I suggest that you go to the first part as a foundation and introduction. So you can really enjoy fully the second. So warm welcome, whether you're live or whether you're listening to the recording. And yeah, I just so appreciate Ubiquity and this book and David Whyte, as well as an educational experience and that's designed to prepare us for times of transition and uncertainty, which require radical collaboration and reinvention across the board. So both offer detailed maps and help us to identify our true voice, our captaincy, as David would say with this book, and to find our most satisfying and meaningful ways forward. So, and also pointing to greater frontiers for conscious evolution and hope. So I hope that sounds good to you and that you're in the right place. And this is also a reason why I love to engage with this book, and I always keep extra copies on hand. So if you're heading through Bern, I can pass you a copy. So I want to start with some context to set the scene and help locate this book in the arc of our times. And then a brief review of some parts from the previous presentation. And then we will shortly revisit the questions that I gave you for contemplation in the time between. And yeah, and then we're going to finish with a few poems, of course, and several beautiful questions to take away with you on your journey and for future contemplation. At the end, we will have time for questions and comments. So let's begin. On the very first page of this book is the following quote by educator and writer Janet Calvin. "Respectable outlaw, you have set sail on another ocean without star or compass, going where the argument leads, shattering certainties of centuries." And that's where we are. We're clearly facing a collective cliff's edge, to use the language of David Whyte. And so we're now at the end of an age of vertical hierarchies and facing the birth of an age of horizontal collaborations. And as Buckminster Fuller said it best, it's best to invent new systems which make the old ones obsolete. So our crisis is a birth of a new age that is shattering centuries of certainties. And old paradigm top-down command and control structures are simply considered outdated. Less effective for fostering collaboration and innovation. The emperor has no clothes, but still is given to fight. Today's zeitgeist is all about freedom of expression, diversity and inclusion, identity reinvention, and bottom-up organization. Global corporations are forced to explore flexible systems such as hybrid work, self-management, and fluid leadership, among other expressions of next generation consciousness. Today's youth are different in that they are connected to collective consciousness, easily connected. Born with technology at their fingertips, they possess an intuitive ease with each other that is enviable. They are closer to the lightness of being a beginner, closer to the essence of life. They have equality and freedom in their bones, but also a knowledge of the way individual freedoms impinge on people and other creatures, and our individual successes. They intuit, are collectively tearing at the fabric of the planet. They are not enticed or dissuaded by traditional carrot and stick approaches to fulfillment. They live lighter and have little interest in preserving things of the past. Old systems are no longer working. Obsolete structures are not going to be maintained. So the old world is crumbling, a new one is being born, a world we haven't seen before, one that we are each creating moment to moment, confronted by conditions that necessitate a profound renaissance. And every one of us is a leader, having greater or lesser impact depending on the size of one's circle of influence. Every one of us is called to expand our reality. Every one of us is called to expand our reality and discover how we are capable of playing our part. Today's zeitgeist is about reinvention, bringing everyone's creativity into collaboration and working together, bridging and healing our fragmented world. So business as usual has been keeping us divided and distracted and out of integrity. And Crossing the Unknown Sea, published 20 years ago, is extremely relevant today. So from page 26 from the author, this book is meant to get below our present preoccupation with the Dow Jones and the NASDAQ and begin in an invisible conversation with all those who have gone before us and those who will inherit what we make of ourselves. It is, for the most part, a personal story, as I have spent much of my life wrestling with unknowns. It is meant to be a dedication to that unknown. I love that part. Our great hope in wrestling with that unknown, we must learn to call our life and our work, is to find a way to call on our courage for all the unknowns to come. I hope this book, based on my perception that at the threshold of our new century, we are attempting to gather whatever courage we have dormant in our hearts, individually and collectively, for a great journey across a difficult and unknown sea. So this is a threshold of in-betweenness, when we have not completely left the old, nor have we fully arrived and embodied the new. We can't pretend to have the full picture. Imagination is therefore essential. For leaders in transition, poetry is great medicine, antidotal to today's turmoil and tensions. Poetic imagination and beautiful questions are highly supportive when bridging worlds. When we most need to focus our gaze, keen and steady, on worthy images and noble initiatives. Only then will we animate desirable outcomes. In times of transition, it is the gentleness of intuition combined with the perseverance of our attention and intentions, the precision of words with their specific vibrational frequencies that unlock other ways of knowing that give birth to new realities. One that makes old conditions obsolete. Extraordinary times forge leadership in us, times when there's nowhere else to turn but to go down and in, to access what is extraordinary within us, times that require a radical simplification and economy of presence. That's something from sort of the middle of the book. David Whyte is talking about Cyrano, the shepherding dog. Times that purify and alchemize us in truth so that the medicine within us may radiate out into the world. In and through times of threshold times, genius is birthed and gives birth to what others cannot imagine. A vision of a different order arising purely through contemplation. Arthur Schopenhauer wrote in his 1818 masterwork, The World as Will and Representation, chapter 31, on genius, talent versus genius. Mere men of talent always come at the right time, as they are roused by the spirit of their age and are called into being by its needs. They are only just capable of satisfying them. They therefore go hand in hand with the advancing culture of their contemporaries, or with the gradual advancement of a special science. For this, they reap reward and approbation, but to the next generation, their works are no longer enjoyable. They must be replaced by others, and these do not fail to appear. The genius, on the other hand, lights on his age like a comet into the paths of the planets, to whose well-regulated and comprehensible arrangement its wholly eccentric course is foreign. Accordingly, he cannot go hand in hand with the regular course of culture or the times as found. On the contrary, he casts his works far out to the path in front of us, just as the emperor, giving himself up to death, flings his spear among the enemy, on which time has first to overtake them. His relation to the culminating men of talent during his time might be expressed in the words of the evangelist, "My time is not yet come, but your time is always ready." Talent is able to achieve what is beyond other people's capacity to achieve, yet not what is beyond their capacity of apprehension. Therefore, it at once finds its appreciators. The achievement of genius, on the other hand, transcends not only others' capacities of achievement, but also their capacity of apprehension. Therefore, they do not become immediately aware of it. Talent is like the marksman who hits the target which others cannot reach. Genius is like the marksman who hits the target as far as which others cannot even see. Genius is the power of leaving one's own interests, wishes, and aims entirely out of sight. Thus, of entirely renouncing one's own personality for a time, so as to remain pure, knowing subject, clear vision of the world. And this not merely at moments, but for a sufficient length of time, and with sufficient consciousness to enable one to reproduce by deliberate art what has thus been apprehended. Imagination has rightly been recognized as an essential element of genius. That was 1818. So I use that long quote because it relates to poetry and poetic imagination, and also just the timelessness of time. Anyway, today, amidst great waves of change, our spirits and imaginations need boosting, as well as daily support. The final segment of Crossing the Unknown Sea, entitled Perspectives, offers practical and poetic suggestions for how to frame and sustain contemplation at home and at work. From chapter 9, entitled A Marriage with Silence, Escaping the Prison of Time and Work. A marriage with silence, escaping the prison of time and work. Here we are. One set of good figures can be replaced by another on the company ledger, and the bottomless hunger of Wall Street is still not appeased, the investors still unsatisfied, the media on the hunt for faults and cracks. What has been done is simply replaced by a new thing to be done. The years fly by until that strange day when all the doing suddenly stops. In retirement, in illness, in bereavement, in death itself. Without an appreciation of the hours of life, we are simply a target for our own incoming death, which approaches us like a missile program to the signature of our own fears. Living the hours spaciously, where we actually have a relationship with silence and timelessness, death is more like a difficult conversation that we join voluntarily. And in a good death, as in a good life, we have a hand in shaping that conversation. Without the timelessness of the hours, celebration, rhythm, and anticipation disappear from our work. We lose the sense of music in our lives. We lose the sense of music in our lives, as if a symphony with all its rests and attenuated beats and rhythms suddenly had all silence between the notes removed, leaving the notes undifferentiated, crushed and bruised, and each sound pressed into the next. Without silence, work is not music, but mechanical hum, like an old refrigerator, the white background noise corroding our attempts at a real conversation, and only noticed in the reverberating kitchen when it finally brings itself to a stop. This perverse relationship with time is not confined to present-day life. The poet Rilke, speaking from the much quieter beginning of the 20th century, saw our difficulties with the hours as an ancient human struggle, To give meaning to the hours, he felt he must give as much weight to the space between events as the events themselves. And the song goes on, Rainer Maria Rilke. My life is not this steeply sloping hour in which you see me hurrying. Much stands behind me. I stand before it like a tree. I am only one of many mouths. And at that, the one that will be still the soonest. I am the rest between notes, which are somehow always in discord, because death's note wants to climb over. But in the dark interval reconciled, they stay there trembling. Rilke looks at the narrow human need to concentrate on the notes in the music, the events of life, the foreground in the picture, until the larger canvas disappears and robs the foreground event of its significance. It rests and its breath. To find our creative powers, in the time-bound world of work, Rilke insists that our inspiration is literally dependent on our expiration. Strangely, on the letting go of significance, on the entry into the silence between the notes, so that the accomplishments of the day can stand against a grander, more spacious background. So today happens to be August 8th, which I feel is very synchronistic. And it's known as the Lion's Gate, which occurs every year, August 8th. The ancient Egyptians, who were pioneers of astronomy, identified an annual constellation between the Earth and star Sirius, taking place between July 26th and August 12th, peaking today on August 8th. As keen and steady observers, they notice that this time is characterized by exceptionally elevated energies and a high activation of frequencies. So to keep it simple, we can think of this time as a natural energetic boost just before harvest season, an obvious time for us to be out in nature, to feel ourselves as part of nature, and to expand our hearts, to become more of who we are, to harvest our natural gifts, and do the work that is right for ourselves and good for the world. This is an invitation to lion-heartedness and what it takes to make your mark in the world. In chapter 6, subtitled From Exhaustion to Wholeheartedness, Brother David Stendelroth, but gently, but firmly encourages David, nudging him to get into alignment and thus able to move forward. It's all right, to support yourself with something secondary until your work has ripened. You have ripened already, and you are waiting to be brought in. Your exhaustion is a form of inner fermentation. You are beginning ever so slowly, wait. Your exhaustion is a form of inner fermentation. He hesitated. You are beginning ever so slowly, he hesitated, to rot on the vine. So some words from David Whyte to this effect, and also in acknowledgement of this day. What shape waits in the seed of you to grow and spread its branches against a future sky? What shape waits in the seed of you to grow and spread its branches against a future sky? That's from What to Remember When Waking. Yeah, so there's an invitation there to just stretch and spread our branches and lift our chest and open our hearts and feel our hearts. And maybe picture a great book. I mean, not a great book, a great tree. I wanted to see if I have something here for you. Hold on. Oh, I need to share screen. Hold on. All right. I hope, am I sharing screen? All right. Let's do this. Can somebody tell me if you see this image? Hello?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. So this is from the Heart Math Institute. And it's just a reminder of this torus that trees are. And I just thought this was a good moment to pause after all of that, to kind of feel in our bodies and feel our hearts, and to remember, just to remember that we're able to receive support and nourishment from the earth, and to open and receive the illumination from above, just like the trees. So take a minute here to imagine yourself and breathe into your heart, lift and open and feel and breathe. And using the imagination, I would like to invite us to imagine that we are a grove of trees together, breathing and lifting each other up. A field of beneficial mutuality, connecting within and without in ways beyond reason. So this is from A Seeming Stillness. I'm going to take a different image here for this poem. Hold on one second. Let's just close that. And yeah, let's just take this one. Okay. Here we go. We are all a sunlit moment come from a long darkness. What moves us always comes from what is hidden. What seems to be said so suddenly has lived in the body for a long, long time. What seems to be said so suddenly has lived in the body for a long, long time. Our life, like a breath, then a give and a take, a bridge, a central moment between singing a separate self and learning to be selfless. A seeming stillness from David Whyte. So Whyte's language activates poetic imagination, and crossing the unknown sea illustrates how to apply this in practical day-to-day ways. Poetry helps us digest and integrate the fierce, radical beauty, those are David Whyte's words, of our experiences and transcend them. Rather than seeking quick answers or short solutions, poetry invites us to slow down and fully engage all of our senses, to open our hearts and minds to the roots and deeper ambiguities of what it is that we must face and accept to be able to move forward. Most importantly, poetry enables us to have a felt sense of meaning, a felt sense of belonging. That is so, so essential in the working world today, and we're missing it and we're losing it. Felt sense of meaning, felt sense of belonging. And direction, a felt sense of direction, like the nautical ones in the South Pacific who could navigate from islands to islands through the vibrations and the feelings in their bodies. Yes, so poetry is a language with psychic depth that reaches down inside you and touches your heart and helps you to feel things you otherwise would not feel. You otherwise would not feel. Taking readers below the surface, as T.S. Eliot said, poetry, like music, should communicate before it is understood. Poetry, like music, should communicate before it is understood. So there is a profound and practical power in poetry. I'm going to choose a different image here, close this out, and we will just, I'm going to take this one. This is my landscape that I grew up with, that I was privileged and lucky enough to grow up with. Long Island, New York. I live in Switzerland now, as some of you know. And so I've made many, many crossings and changes in my life. And that's what this book is about, having the courage to make changes. And sometimes later in life, it's harder, but you've got to reach down into your truth and know when it's time. So in Whyte's words, poetry does not take surface political sides. It is always the conversation that neither side is having. It is always the conversation that neither side is having. It is the breath in the voice about to discover itself only as it begins to speak. It is the voice about to discover itself only as it begins to speak. And it is that voice firmly anchored in a real and touchable body, standing on the ground of a real inhabited world, speaking from a source that lives and thrives at the threshold between opposing sides we call society. That's from the book Essentials by David Whyte. And from his website, poetry is a language against which we have no defenses. Poetry is a language against which we have no defenses. Nothing wimpy here. The poet lives and writes at the frontier between deep internal experiences and the revelations of the outer world. There is no going back once this frontier has been reached. A new territory is visible, and what has been said cannot be unsaid. David Whyte is truly giving poetry a modern day rebranding. And in his words, in a sense, all poems are good. All poems are an emblem of courage and the attempt to say the unsayable, an attempt to say the unsayable. But only a few are able to speak to something universal, yet personal and distinct at the same time, to create a door through which others can walk into a previously seemed unobtainable realms, into what previously seemed unattainable realms. We're going to return to this towards a little bit later in the presentation. So, to create a door through which others can walk into what previously seemed unattainable realms in the passage of a few short lines. That's the key. How efficient is that? In the passage of a few short lines, able to achieve what previously seemed unobtainable realms. So regarding prose, Whyte says this: it is the art of explaining, while poetry is the very essence of the thing itself. But prose can come within a hair's breadth of poetry in a good novel or story beautifully told. That he does. My prose books, in some way, have all been explanations of what I feel my poetry holds without any explanation. But in storytelling, that prose allows perspectives. That prose allows perspectives can be won and most of all enjoyed by far beyond the satisfactions of mere explanation. Enjoyed far beyond the satisfactions of mere explanation. Two poems that live inside of me that are in this book, The Swan and Working Together. These two poems, I'm going to change the image here, hold on. Choose this one. This is my landscape. This is where we had our seminar retreat center, if you can believe it. Love bringing people to the mountains to connect with themselves and connect with nature and connect with each other. So these two poems could beautifully summarize this book, The Swan and Working Together. Maybe you can imagine. The Swan reminds us that appearances are never exactly what they appear to be, and that both awkwardness and grace belong to the territory of beginnings, arrivals, and of endings. I am reminded and reassured that awkwardness and grace both have their place at birth. I gave birth to my kids in the mountains. And death. And whenever we are attempting to do or learn something new, awkwardness and grace belong in this territory. There is no place for judgment, only for what is true and authentic, so that we can learn how to work together with others and with the elements. The journey is about accepting and participating in what Whyte calls the conversational nature of reality, defined as the fact that we don't get to choose so often between things we hope we can choose between. the conversational nature of reality. We're not living in the old world where it's a monologue. It's a conversational world. It's an invitational world. The journey is about discovering our capacities, our part to play, and growing in confidence, collaboratively and co-creatively. Part one of this presentation highlighted one of my favorite poems, actually, probably my favorite poem, The Swan by Rainer Maria Rilke, as translated by Robert Bly, on page 131, if you're looking for it. A timeless work of art that touches the edges of immortality. Those are my words. And encapsulates the very essence of life. Contemplation of these few short lines could summarize crossing the unknown sea. The journey of finding one's true voice and making one's mark. Therefore, I offer you two different translations to demonstrate how each poem, each translation, presents a very specific combination of words, of musicality and emphasis. Each version dials up a different frequency for unlocking different aspects of consciousness and wisdom. Each engenders a specific aspect of consciousness and wisdom. A different melody and vibe or gestalt, just like speaking different languages. When you're speaking one language, you have a certain vibe, a certain understanding, a certain easy access. Yes. So Rilke's language and David Whyte's language for that part, Rilke's language is extremely precise, speaking directly from the heart of truth. I'm going to choose another picture here. Image. The Jungfrau. This is my mountain. The famous Jungfrau in the Bernese Oberland. I love the way she is embracing us with her arms. Here it is, the swan. This laboring of ours with all that remains undone, as if still bound to it, is like the lumbering gait of the swan. And then dying, releasing ourselves from the very ground on which we stood, is like the way he hesitantly lowers himself into the water. It gently receives him and gladly yielding flows back beneath him as wave follows wave, while he now wholly serene and sure, with regal composure, allows himself to glide. That translation is by Joanna Macy and Anita Burrows. It's different than the one from Robert Bly, which we had last week. Different emphasis, different melody, different vibe. Here's another one, The Swan. Similar, but pay attention to what it does for you and how it feels in your body. Let it communicate to you before you have to understand it, feel it. This laboring through what is still undone, as though legs bound, we hobbled along the way. We hobbled along the way. We is like the awkward walking of the swan. And dying to let go, no longer feel the solid ground we stand on every day, no longer feel the solid ground we stand on every day, is like anxiously letting himself fall into waters which receive him gently, when he's falling, and which, as though with reverence and joy, draws back past him in streams on either side, while infinitely silent, while infinitely silent and aware in his full majesty, and even more indifferent, he condescends to glide. He condescends to glide. That's something very special. This is translated by Stephen Mitchell. So it's very interdimensional, multidimensional, and powerful. So in addition to the swan, I recited several other poems, each paired with one of the following beautiful questions. I hope you had time to chew on those, to sleep on those, to walk with those. So to review, a beautiful question is one that elicits a profound inquiry. It goes beyond seeking a straightforward answer, beyond seeking a straightforward answer. It delves into greater depths of understanding. It invites exploration and reflection rather than looking for a quick solution. Here again are those questions. Each were paired with a different poem, but here's the first question. What is the most significant crossing that you are currently traversing in some realm of your personal or career life? You have that from last time. You can write it down. I'll repeat each one twice, and if you don't have it, you can write them down. What is the most significant crossing that you are currently traversing in some realm of your personal or career life? Most significant. Number two, just having contact with your elemental waters, your elemental sense of belonging. This is what gives you grace and supports you in your essence, supporting your buoyancy, supporting your buoyancy. What are your elemental waters? What are your elemental waters? Number three, Whyte describes the cliff edge as a frontier where passion, belonging, and need call for your presence, your powers, and your absolute commitment. Absolute commitment. That's the firm persuasion that William Blake is referring to in his quote at the beginning of the book. Firm persuasion. That's what it takes to cross an unknown sea. And how many people have firm persuasion? So here's the question. How has your cliff's edge called to you and or opened you? How has your cliff's edge called to you and or opened you? Number four, Whyte eventually arrives in his true vocational footing and feels that he is standing in exactly the right place, doing exactly the right thing in exactly the right way. Can you identify with a time when everything came together in stunning unity and flow? Can you identify with a time when everything came together in stunning unity and flow? If so, what? Where? I want to know. When? Inquiring minds want to know. Why and how did that happen? So part one of this presentation addressed the first half of the book, which focuses on the foundational realm of knowing thyself. That is the stable ground that we must have to cross unknown seas. Outer seas, we have to have the inner stability, knowing thyself. The fundamental necessity of belonging to oneself as an essential stability, especially during times of transition. Whyte describes his own transformational journey as journey of crises, questions, turning points in his search for meaningful work suited to his nature, an archetypal journey we can all relate to. The journey through beginnings of having a job, to the mid-ocean of doing a career, to the arrival of courageously showing up arriving, arriving. He likens himself to Rilke's swan, stumbling in the right direction, stumbling in the right direction, with a delightful ability to laugh at himself. I think that's one of the things that's most endearing about David Whyte. So from page 146, facing the world, to find good work, no matter the path we have chosen, means coming out of hiding. Hello. Good work means visibility. And from page 147, work is exposure. 147, I want to read you something. 147, here we go. Okay, hang on to your horses. Just be yourself, people say, as if they have suddenly thought of something entirely original, and as if they have forgotten the terrible, wrenching initiations most religions insist on for arriving at the elusive self. Further down on the page, their ability to see us and know us in ways that give them a close knowledge of who we are and what we are attempting to do in the world can seem too much, too intimate, too soon. Vulnerability and intimacy can make a frightening shoreline. But that is a wave line we must walk in work. Work is exposure. Our fancy ideas of ourselves, a sandcastle built right at the edge of the incoming sea. Hence those long nightmare dream rehearsals which have us practicing the dramatic confrontation, facing the waves, or the immensity of faces, as naked as the day we were born. I did have my clothes on that morning, which was a slight saving grace. Though at the time, if I had thought of an instant that their removal might help create an interesting moment for the waiting crowd, then I might have thrown them off in an instant. Like a climactic scene from the Full Monty, a blaze, a final blaze of poetic, suicidal career glory. My hat spinning crazily into the astonished crowd. Can't you just picture it? I held on to my metaphorical hat, but the self-revealing nature and final uncovering I had to do felt much the same. This was not an ordinary talk, a subject of passing interest for me. This was the core work of presenting poetry to the world, my own and others, to which I had dedicated myself. This was all of my intuitions about what I was supposed to do in life, a talk in which I was putting everything on the line. This was my work. So, yes, I love the way he likens himself to the swan, and the way he uses birth. I understand that quite well, and maybe you too. We've all been there or given birth. So yeah, and in the end, he likens this experience of coming out, and this is very much the work I do with understanding pre- and perinatal birth psychology and working with leaders. He likens the experience to birth, squandering no extra energy at all, not even for the actions of everyday living, so that I would have it all for this moment. Can you relate to that? That creation of those energies that kind of forge the birth of something new. So I just have a few more, check the time here. I just have just a few more. Let's see, what do we want to do? We're going to choose. Oh, this is quite an amazing picture. Ireland. I hope to go there someday. I haven't been to Ireland, been many places, not yet to Ireland. But it's on my top of my list. So fluid leadership. This is where we want to go now. We see the water. Fluid leadership and the grand tour. I really want to read page 193. It's so spectacular. Hold on. Here we go. Okay, love it. Because oftentimes when you talk about these things, people say, it's a luxury. It is, it's a privilege. These are luxurious inquiries. But hopefully, we stand our ground and say, hey, I've earned it. I've dedicated myself to this, to showing up this way. But here, I really want to share Irish poet Patrick Kavanagh's way. Here's his poem. Me, I will throw away, me sufficient for the day, the sticky self that clings, adhesions on the wings, to love and adventure, to go on the grand tour. A man must be free from self-necessity. It continues, but I just want to share this. From a man who mostly wandered the grimy streets of working-class Dublin in the 1950s, there is an astonishing, lifting freedom in Kavanagh's allusion to the grand tour. To the sons of 18th century British and Irish aristocracy, the grand tour was the finishing of a rich man's education. A year among the splendors of France, Switzerland, and Italy. But Kavanagh has ennobled himself. He has ennobled himself in his own imagination and sends the part of himself, poor as a church mouse, but now nobly born into the world, to the farther ends of the earth. I will have love, have love. I will have love. I will have love from anything made of, and a life with a shapely form, with gaiety and charm. I will have that. And capable of receiving with grace, the grace of living, the grace, with grace, the grace of living, and wild moments to self. When freed from you, Prometheus, call me on. Prometheus calls me on. Son, he says, we'll go off together in this delightful weather. The power of poetic imagination. Prometheus stole fire from the gods and brought it to earth. Kavanagh had done the same in this poem and lit up the day for himself and anyone who comes across this piece of utter courage and untrammeled freedom. Utter courage and untrammeled freedom. How we greet the dawn is a measure of the freedom of how we have made for ourselves, a measure of the freedom we have made for ourselves. Freedom in the midst of imprisonment, freedom in the midst of all the catastrophes common to the sins of humankind, the hidden made glorious by sudden visibility. A man giving birth to himself. We have to give birth to ourselves, walking off with his new son to greet the day. Suddenly waking from the night and the difficulties of the night, the grand tour. That's on page 194. So here's the question for you. When have you elevated yourself? When have you ennobled yourself to take on a different shape, to identify yourself in a different way, which allowed you to experience a new possibility? One that you would never have dreamed of. When have you done that? When have you ennobled yourself to take on a different identity, which allowed you to experience a new possibility, one that you would have never dreamed possible? How did you expand your reality? How did you do that? How did you expand your reality? Something we all have to do, especially today. So I want to finish with this final poem, Working Together by David Whyte. Halfway through the talk. Okay, here we are. So halfway through the talk, there was an absolute living bond between myself and the audience. This is his arrival. I love this. There was an absolute living bond between myself and the audience. So let me just see, 149, hold on. There we go. Okay. There was an absolute living bond between myself and the audience, as if there were no speaker and no listener, and the words were simply being created at the unknown frontier between listening and speaking, between listening and speaking. I looked out and knew this was the edge at which I wanted to live. This was the line between speech and revelation, hearing and arrival. We capture on the page and call poetry. This was my work, my water, my elemental home to which I had staggered so awkwardly and so unfaithfully. It doesn't seem to matter how awkwardly the swan moves when it is out of its element, tripping over itself on land. The arrival and grace of the creature, once it reaches that water, removes all blemish from the struggle to get there. All right, here is the poem. This poem is a perfect illustration of the conversational nature of reality, which is really the essence of all of David Whyte's work, reminding us life is conversational, it's invitational, leadership is conversational, it's invitational, or true leadership, or the kind of leadership that we need going forward. Here we go. He wrote this, I think it was commissioned by Boeing to write this poem. And I think at first he resisted, like, what? I commissioned to write a poem for Boeing, but he pulled out the plugs and he produced this sublime piece of work. Working together, we shape ourselves to fit this world, and by the world are shaped again. The visible and the invisible, working together in common cause, to produce the miraculous, to produce the miraculous. I am thinking of the way the intangible air traveled at speed round a shaped wing. I am thinking of the way the intangible air traveled at speed round a shaped wing. Easily holds our weight, easily holds our weight. So may we in this life trust. So may we in this life trust to the elements we have yet to see or imagine, and look for the true shape of our own self by forming it well to the great intangibles about us. Working Together by David Whyte. Here's the final question. No, it's not the final question for you, but it's a good one. Here we go. When have you experienced this disappearance of the self? As Whyte describes, to be yourself is to be no self at all, but to be the frontier between you and the audience, the frontier between you and your team, to be that space between. The frontier between you and your pen as you write your PhD, the space between, not to hold yourself, not to get in your own way. When and where have you experienced this being sublimely supported? When have you experienced being sublimely supported to create beyond what you could do, what you could be, where you could go on your own? When and where have you experienced being sublimely supported to be and do and go where you could never go all on your own? We have more together than we do alone. Finally, the ending of the book, chapter 11, is subtitled the new and newly youthful world of work. Whyte reminds us at the end of every life, long or short, is the question of ultimate contribution. We must contemplate the loss of everything to know what it is that we have to give. In other words, our legacy. So contemplate your death. That's your homework. Only then, I mean, death is really one of the greatest counselors and psychotherapists. Whyte ends the book with this perspective. All of us are young. All of us are young. All of us are young and have the possibilities of the young until our last breath. I love that. I mean, as a young child, I always was paying attention to the elders who had a sparkle in their eye and a lilt and a little dance going on and up to a little mischief. Whereas sometimes the younger people could be totally boring. They say, die before you die. So the structure of the book is exquisite, beginning with youthful vision. The structure of the book is exquisite, beginning with youthful vision. Whyte's youthful adventures, so fun to read, wasn't it? Building a foundation step by step through the book for Whyte's ultimate arrival. That's such an amazing archetype also to contemplate, practicing arrival. So we're a little bit prepared when that event actually happens. So he ends in full circle with youthful vision via today's youth. The beauty of youth's offerings is a vision that continually renews the world by looking at it with fresh eyes. This is my language, the beauty of youth's offering. This is David Whyte, a vision that continually renews the world by looking at it with fresh eyes. We have to practice that, looking at things with fresh eyes. Whyte quotes John Keats at the end. There is nothing stable in the world. Uproar is your music, your only music. Uproar is your only music. Today's youth are the first generation of a melded world via global media and shared concerns. It's fascinating to reflect on the role that music plays. Really, that's something, I wish I was at Chatra this year. Couldn't make it, sorry, Jim. But that is something I think I want to go deeper in for sure, along with poetry. So Whyte warns about the dangers of frontier technologies with small-minded artificial languages and leaders who have been promoted from a purely technological background. Here is his words. We must bring our visionary artistic powers into emancipation with our highly trained empirical powers of division and deduction. He claims that the successful companies will be the ones that do not merely lather lobbyists and politicians with buckets of money in order to keep this new world at bay, but the successful companies are the ones who are in conversation with this emerging alternative vision of today. So Whyte began the book with Blake's quote regarding a firm persuasion. Begin your journeys and your crossings with a firm persuasion. And he finishes, well, actually we will finish. I want to finish with Derek Mohan's Creative Frontier. Here we go, page 196. All right, this is lovely. You're going to enjoy this. All righty, here we go. So this is Derek Mohan, who is one of Ireland's finest contemporary poets. And this poem is really about possibility. How should I not be glad to contemplate the clouds clearing beyond the dormer window and a high tide reflected on the ceiling? There will be dying, but there is no need to go into that. The poems flow from the hand unbidden, and the hidden sources, and the hidden source is the watchful heart. The hidden source is the watchful heart. The sun rises in spite of everything, and the far cities are beautiful and bright. I lie here in a riot of sunlight, watching the daybreak and the clouds flying. Everything is going to be all right. Wait for it. Good poets don't normally go in for any form of fluffy positive thinking. Good poets don't go in for any form of fluffy positive thinking. Hold on. So that last line is incredibly intriguing, especially from an Irish poet who comes from a tradition where everything is emphatically not been all right. You can write the line, everything is going to be all right, only if you have earned it by first writing. Derek Mohan's arrival at this astonishing creative frontier arises from the fact that he is all attention. That's what we have to be, all attention, witnesses, awake, watching, at choice. He has a tremendously watchful heart, earned probably by all the hard writing he's done to get himself to this particular threshold and this particular morning. But the hard work leavening by the rest of the previous night and the beauty and possibility of the coming morning makes him all arrival. So in the spirit of full circle, full keyboard, full spectrum, we end with arrival. And here's your final question. Young or old, when was the last time that you felt this level of youthful possibility? I love that. When was the last time that you felt this level of youthful possibility, whether you're young or old? And with that, I'm complete. Thank you very much for your attention and your precious time. I'm complete, Jim.
Thank you, Sanna. Maybe you could stop your screen share. There you go. Not sure where to start. We've got about 20 minutes left. And
maybe I have an idea. Maybe people would share what they've done in between the first part and the second part.
Well, I was just going to ask people, if you have any comments or questions, anyone, please let me know by raising your hand, and I can bring you on, and or put the question in the chat. But I think what was striking to me about your presentation was something that Leo Jacoby put in the chat from T.S. Eliot, that genuine poetry communicates before it is understood. And I think the poetry of David Whyte is very much in that category, and is one of the reasons why, according to linguists, poetry predated prose. That prose is actually the most inexact of the linguistic formulations. And so I just want to acknowledge the way that you were weaving prose and poetry together. And what was striking me kind of secondly, Sanna, was the different kinds of pilgrimages that are possible. And I just finished kind of an outer journey to Chartres and then down to the Dordogne in France, where we traveled 90 some people in Chartres and nearly 30 people into Dordogne, from A to B, to go into a certain sacred telluric energy and space. And what David Whyte is talking about is the pilgrimage where you don't leave home, essentially. It's an inner pilgrimage of the spirit, but with the same kind of intentionality. And what is required for either or both is the same qualities of spirit and determination and creativity. So that was something that was striking me as you were talking, that you cross the unknown sea in your own heart, sitting in a chair, as much as flying from San Francisco to Paris to get to Chartres, and then go down to the south of France and then come back. And I'm just wondering, having done both, what comment you would make on this, this crossing of the unknown sea in terms of its inner and outer dimensions. Is it all the same, or are there distinctions?
Well, I'm a great fan of the full spectrum, not either or, but both and is good for me. And I love to hug and I love to see people. And there's something very special that happens in person. So that is powerful. So I wouldn't choose one or the other. I can say that after September 11th, because I flew out of JFK right when that was happening with my little ones, I made a decision that I don't fly unless it's really purposeful, unless it's really, really, very much on purpose. So these days, I don't leave home unless it's really, really something that I can't not do. And so, yeah, and I think it's very, so expansive, this book and these concepts, and these possibilities. That's why I got so kind of jazzed and energized around creating, especially the second part of this presentation, because it's about infinity and possibilities, and also sort of the fluidity of poetic imagination. And who am I being today? Who do I want to be, and how do I want to show up, and how do I want to participate? Because we can be so utterly flattened by paying attention to what's going on in the world right now. And it takes me a lot of inner work, to find my energy when I'm, very distracted, and we've just been through such a time of division, and that's why I feel like this book is a great book and an antidote for these times. And I mean, pilgrimage, wow. I mean, I could have said so much more about pilgrimage in the presentation, but I'd love to hear what other people have to say.
Yeah, I don't see any hands yet, folks. I'd like the students to raise their hands here. I see Dave McQuarrie. Dave, are you there?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah, what would be your comment on these matters?
Well, it was a delightful series of presentations that I very much enjoyed. For a variety of reasons, I don't relate well to poetry, but this was especially interesting to me. I'm 80 years old now, and what stands out for me is the importance of continuing the journey. For example, amongst other things, I have 6 university degrees, and I'm currently doing a 7th. I'm doing a Master of Arts in Theological Studies because it keeps me alive. It keeps me engaged with people. It keeps me relating, partly at the intellectual level, but very much at the creative level. And that is for me what stands out. As you know, Jim, I'm a retired psychotherapist, and I continue to do emotional work with people. And I'm doing a workshop next month called Laughter Plus, taking laughter yoga and asking how to transform ourselves into effective human beings. Not effective in the sense of, fitting into the culture, but effective in terms of being satisfied with who we are. So on the one hand, I'm looking at laughter, and on the other hand, looking at how to transform the anxiety that we experience as human beings and the critic voice that we experience as human beings, so that they do not limit us in the ways of living. I think that's probably enough for now.
Dave, I have just a thought just to kind of emphasize, poetry is not really meant to be read. It's meant to be recited. Have you explored like your voice and the recitation of it?
I'm going to. And I'm currently reading what is McGilchrist's The Master and the Emissary, and how important it is to recognize the significance of pre-verbal language and music, and that it was what preceded the dominance that we have given to discursive language, and that we have to find a way back from that.
Great. Look forward to hearing more.
Yeah, the point that I think Dave is making too, Sanna, is worthy of your comment in relationship to the last point you raised, with which David Whyte ends his book around, young or old, cultivating youthful enthusiasm, but always with a view of what is constructively being offered by your activity. It's an important point that for the entirety of our lives, whether you're 80 or only 8, one is cultivating the exuberance of youthful enthusiasm, but with a view of offering something good into the world. I think that's sort of the bottom line. And as long as, as Andrew Harvey says, what is it that wakes you up at 3 a.m.? What's that passion? Whatever that passion is, that's where the trap lines of youthful idealism reside. And, David, I know David McCory for many years now, and I think, David, you embody that as diligently as you can, and that's exemplifies what David Whyte is. That's what makes possible the crossing.
The buoyancy.
Yeah, totally in agreement, Jim.
Yeah,
and
buoyancy.
Good to see you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dave. 7 degrees, my goodness. You're a better man than me, as they say.
I have more letters after my name than my grandfather.
Well, good for you. Okay, anyone else that wants to make a comment here? Any other students? Barbara, Forbes, do you want to say something? It'd be good to hear your voice. Or Leo, you've been active in the chat. Do you want to say anything? Maybe they're driving here. Mary McNamara. Shoo. Oh, there's Joan. Okay, Joan, you're able to talk. There we
Can you
go.
hear?
Uh-huh.
Can you hear?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I just want to give thanks for the presentation. I felt the spirit of the whole thing by the way, the repetition, the energy of it, repeating, moving, and strangely enough, was first introduced to that way of expression through born-again Christians in New Zealand. I saw that the way they came at scripture was by this repetition and this excitement, this thrill, as a matter of fact. And that's exactly what you were bringing forward, somehow coming through the spirit and into making the words come alive. They were dancing. And so to me, that was so valuable. And I'd love to go hear the whole thing again. I wonder if it's being recorded. It is?
Yeah, everything is recorded and you can find it in our YouTube channel. Just
Okay.
Equity University YouTube channel, and or go on our website and just write in great books and it'll pop up.
Okay, thank you so much for the presentation. Wonderful.
Well, good. Shoo. What is your comment?
Hi, everyone. So thank you very much, Sanna. Thank you very much for this presentation. I think this is really deep touching you, this poetries, and it's very deep connected to your history of moving to Switzerland. I can feel how you relate to it, and yes, I think it was some movements may be necessary in life, and so you came to Ubiquity University now, and it's the next step, and yes, this is the circle, I guess. So yes, keep going, and thank you very much, Sanna.
Thank you. Juju.
Shoo.
Mwah.
So, Sanna, any closing comments that you would like to make?
Let me just tune into it right now. I think I have to go back and listen to the presentation myself, but this is really fun, Jim. I am so grateful to Ubiquity. I think you guys do a tremendous job as far as online community, which isn't easy to do, but I just, these kinds of offerings and the Humanity Rising and the combination with opportunities to meet in person, it's absolutely unique. I haven't come across anything like it. Well, I mean, of course, there are different kinds of communities, but it's absolutely beautiful. And when I shared this with friends and colleagues, they just loved the idea of sharing great books. And it's very heartwarming somehow to connect in this way and share what we love and have the opportunity to go deeper. So I'm definitely going deeper with David Whyte and with poetry, and to be continued. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Sanna. So this wraps up our 2-month program with Sanna on David Whyte's Crossing the Unknown Sea. Next month, we will dive into Eric Hoffer's The True Believer, which I read first when I was 15 years old. So I'll be doing the lectures over the next couple of months, and would just say that the timeliness of the exploration into what constitutes a true believer and what Jung called mass psychosis and hysteria could not be more relevant than what we are seeing around the world at the present time, whether it's the Republican Party inside the United States, whether it's the mass hysteria around the war in Ukraine. There's all kinds of examples of what happens when people let go of the very qualities that David Whyte is talking about. You become susceptible to tyrants, demagogues, and all kinds of delusional imaginations. And as Voltaire said, if you can get me to believe absurdities, you can get me to commit any kind of atrocity. And one of the reasons why we're in the world in which we find ourselves is because we've all become true believers in one way or another, even if we're unconscious of that process. The mass consumerism is an exercise in the true believer. So that'll be the next 2 months. Eric offers a small little book that I'll be commenting on starting in September and then October. Okay, Sanna, brilliant, wonderful. We have been honored and love that you're part of our doctoral writing cohort and one of our students, and really appreciate the depth that you've taken us for this exploration of David Whyte. Okay, everyone, thank you all so much, and we will see you next month, same time, same station. Bye for now. Thank you, Sanna.